Love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's a promise that keeps adding interest until the bill comes due. The text arrived at 4:12 p.m., when late June sun still slanted through my kitchen window and turned the dust into glitter. Mom, tonight's event is kind of for the young crowd. Let's save tomorrow for you. Love you. It was polite, clean, and airbrushed, like a showroom couch no one is allowed to sit on. I read it twice, then a third time. As if repetition could tease out a softer meaning. It didn't. I set my wooden spoon across the pot so the chicken soup wouldn't boil over. My hands, which could lift laundry bags and fatigue in the same motion, trembled just enough to make the spoon rattle. I have spent most of my life in this kitchen in the south side of Chicago, stirring on a budget, seasoning with worry, stretching meals, and hopes with equal thrift. Most rooms forget what you've said in them. Kitchens remember. Mine remembered when Calvin would sit at the corner, shoulders a wall against bad news. It remembered Marcus shooting up in height, every summer adding something to his frame and taking something from my savings. It remembered Maya, small and stubborn, sounding out her name on a napkin with a crayon. This kitchen kept our secrets. It knew what it cost to keep us going. For the younger crowd, the words pressed somewhere under my ribs. Since when did a mother become a misfit in her son's joy? When did my age have a dress code? My lower back clicked like an old hinge when I sat. The pain medication reminder on my phone chimed. I swallowed the pill with tap water and waited for memory to wash up, as it always does when a new hurt arrives, one wave carrying another. There were years when I worked 3 jobs and wore them like coats I couldn't take off. In the mornings, I checked blood pressures in a clinic that smelled like bleach and apology. In the evenings, came home long enough to switch shoes and for Maya to kiss my elbow because she couldn't reach one cheek. At night, I pushed a janitor's cart through a high school, chemistry rooms with equations on the board, football posters on lockers, a future I hoped my kids would recognize when they met it. Then Calvin died, quick as a light flicked off. They called it a cardiac event, like it was something you could schedule and reschedule if traffic looked bad. The rain was biblical that night. I waited at a bus stop with the city sliding down my coat, trying to swallow sobs because I had exactly 3 tissues and 2 children. A black sedan eased to the curb. The window rolled down, and a woman with gray at her temples and composure in her posture asked if I was all right. People asked that question, the way they asked the weather. Her voice made it sound like a promise. "Name is Alina Whitmore," she said, and only later would I learn the weight that name carried, how it could build a scholarship with a signature or float a nonprofit with a phone call. That night she handed me a towel and her card. "Come here tomorrow, say I sent you." The next day I left with a plain envelope that felt heavier than its contents. It covered Calvin's remaining hospital bill. It carried Maya's first semester tuition. It gave me 1 breath more than I had. "No one gets to buy your dignity with their generosity," Alina told me, eyes steady as a metronome. "Take the help, keep the spine." I promised. It is only later you learn how slippery promises are, how they flinch when money and gratitude start negotiating terms in your chest. Time did what it does. It moved forward without asking permission. My back gave out early and ushered me into retirement I hadn't budgeted for. Marcus learned to speak in the clipped, confident sentences of tech meetings. He bought shirts with collars that remembered they were supposed to be crisp. He loved me by fixing my router and reminding me to update my phone. Progress in my family has always sounded like clicking keys and the sigh of relief when rent is covered. Olivia arrived with good hair and the bright glaze of someone used to being looked at. She was an influencer, which I understand the way I understand the moon. I can point to it, but I cannot tell you what it's made of. She filmed the tender, photographed the polished, and captioned whatever wouldn't sit still. "MS, Loretta," she said the first time we met, a sweetness in her mouth that tasted, how can I put it, strategic. "Marcus deserves the world, and so do you." I smiled because I was raised to. Compliments are a kind of weather too, you open your umbrella just in case. When they got engaged, Lena came by with a basket of peaches and that quiet way she has of standing back while still holding you up. "My foundation can help jumpstart the celebration," she offered. Not to make things grand, just to make the load light. I told her no twice and then yes once. She made a transfer directly to the event company so my pride could keep both hands in its pockets. "Remember the boundary," she said, like she was handing me a map. "Gratitude is not consent." I believed I could manage that line, and the budget email came. A riverside venue with chandeliers like captured constellations, floral arrangements flown farther than I've ever traveled, a tasting menu that read like a novella, and a number at the bottom that marched across the screen in neat, merciless digits, $120,000. I thought it was typo. Olivia talked about timeless aesthetics and brand alignment. I nodded and took out my checkbook like an old soldier saluting. I sold the Buick that still smelled faintly of Calvin's aftershave. Borrowed against a little community credit union because that's what people like me do. We tie the future to the present and hope the knot holds. Then there was a behind-the-scenes video. It went viral, which is a way of saying strangers decided our lives were a public swimming pool. A joke about Southside chic, tinted with condescension. Comments like small cuts. I turned the phone screen face down and stirred my soup. Now the message, kind of for the young crowd. I typed I understand. Have fun, the way mothers write I'm fine on a day they bury their favorite plant. Then I erased the words and let the phone be heavy in my palm. Sometimes the heaviest thing you can lift at my age is a boundary. I called Marcus. Voicemail scooped me up. I called again. He didn't answer. Treat phones like extensions of their hands until the person calling is their mother with a question that might cost them something. I set the phone down and stood, every vertebra checking in with me like roll call. Then I walked to the landline, the corkscrew cord and the receiver warm with history. I dialed the Riverside venue. The coordinator sounded like a storefront window. Clear, reflective, a little cold. Introduced myself as the signatory on the contract and asked about cancellation. She explained the penalties in a voice that had learned to strip the softness from money. I wrote numbers in my spiral notebook with a blue pen and added in the margin, "No one buys your dignity with their generosity." I underlined it. Twice. Next I called the florist, the lighting crew, the sound engineer. Everyone had the same 3 voices, cheerful for booking, careful for charges, clinical for cancellation. I listened to them all. People think the hardest part about drawing a line is announcing it. It isn't. It's sitting quietly while the world adjusts to the new shape of you. When the soup cooled, I ladled a bowl and set it across from me by the chair Calvin used to fill. I've kept the habit on nights that matter. I might be doing the foolish thing or the necessary one. I told the empty chair. Maybe both. A breeze from the window lifted the kitchen curtain. I like to think that was his way of saying, "Go on, Loretta." The phone lit again, Marcus. Then again. By the 11th ring, I could hear his breath in my head, the way it used to hitch when he was 8 and pleading for 5 more minutes at the park. The 30th ring, I answered and put him on speaker so I wouldn't have to hold anything else right then. "What did you do?" he asked, voice thin with the strain of wanting two incompatible things to be true at the same time. In the background, the event buzzed, glasses, laughter, the clink of a future being staged. "I did what makes sense for the person paying the bill," I said, steady as a sidewalk. "If I am too old to be invited, then I'm old enough not to fund it." Islands traveled the line, heavy as a packed suitcase. "Mom," he said finally softer, "don't do this. We'll have you tomorrow. Tonight is just, it's just for the young crowd." I finished for him. "I know. You're ruining my life," he said, the way only a beloved son can accuse, mixing panic with love until the cocktail tastes like resentment. "Baby," I said, because he will always be the boy with skin knees in my eyes if a party can ruin your life. Life needs sturdier walls. He exhaled, a sound like surrender and temper meeting in a narrow hallway. I ended the call before he could stack apologies and threats in the same breath and hand them to me like flowers with thorns. I leaned back and my spine made a small, satisfied sound. There are bends that come from age and bends that come from courage. Sometimes they are the same bend. Out the window, the sky gathered rain. I wasn't afraid of rain anymore. Put a second bowl of soup in the fridge for tomorrow, when storms would knock again with new names. Tonight I ate at the table with the chair across from me and discovered I wasn't as empty as the text had wanted me to be. There will come a day, I thought, stirring, when I'll have to set a boundary with the person I love most. Maybe that day had circled my calendar in invisible ink for years. Maybe this was only the beginning of reading all the fine print on promises we'd writ to each other. Either way, I was done paying interest on silence. Morning came with the smell of rain rinsed off the city. The street outside looked scrubbed, like someone had stayed up late to make sure it would all begin again. I washed my coffee mug by hand because some things feel better earned. The phone stayed face down on the counter. If the world needed me before 8, would have to knock on the door. It was Alina who knocked. She never called first, not when the air between us was heavy. She knew how worry can turn a phone into a trap. When I opened the door, she stood there in her yellow slicker, gray hair tucked behind one ear, as if she were just a neighbor returning a borrowed dish. Behind her, the sky was the color of a bruise about to fade. "You look city," she said, stepping inside. It wasn't a compliment. It was a measurement. "I'm trying," I told her. We sat at the table, the two of us with our mugs like bookends on a life you might shelve under perseverance. Her eyes did that searching without prying, the way a good nurse checks vials without waking you. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Nothing," I said, meaning everything but money. I needed to do a hard thing and not talk myself out of it. She nodded, then let the quiet stay long enough to be useful. That was one of Alina's gifts. She knew that silence, handled right, can be a kind of brace. "Do you remember the first night we met?" she asked. But of course she knew I did. "It smelled like damp wool," I said. "And Diesel, you had a handkerchief that looked like it had wiped decades clean. You looked like someone who had memorized everyone else's needs and mislaid her own." She smiled, not unkindly. I recognized the type. We drifted there together, back to the bus stop and the envelope, to the way relief can make you dizzy if you haven't eaten in hours. There's a gravity to certain moments, you circle them for the rest of your life, sometimes without noticing. "I took your help and promised myself I wouldn't let it own me," I said. "Turns out ownership is sneaky. It shows up dressed as gratitude." Alina reached across, touched my knuckles the way a mother does when she wants your pulse without embarrassing you by counting. "Help is supposed to feel like a handrail," she said. "If it starts to feel like a leash, you cut it." Her words loosened something in my chest, and memory unspooled further. Ask that first envelope to the months when I kept her kindness tucked where Marcus and Maya couldn't see it. It wasn't shame. It was a mother's superstition. I believed if I hid the size of the rescue, my children would not learn to measure themselves by it. I paid what I could and called the rest a bridge we would cross and recross until it held like land. When Maya's first tuition payment came due, Alina phoned the bursar instead of me. "This way, there won't be any confusion," said, as if confusion were simply a clerk's error and not a storm a person carries inside. To this day, Maya thinks her scholarship was patchwork of school funds and my savings, which is not untrue. You can piece the truth and still keep your promises warm. Marcus, for his part, did what Ella's sons from small kitchens do. He sprinted. He learned the taste of coffee that costs more than dinner used to, the feel of a laptop that weighs less than what you owe a parent. He sent me photos of his office view and texted me the word mom with no punctuation, the way you text a person you do not want to worry, but also cannot fully explain yourself to. He carried the future the way Calvin once carried drywall up 3 flights, with the quiet belief that building is better than dreaming. Olivia came later, and with her came light. Ring lights, studio lights, that merciless shine of public attention. He filmed a pot of chili in my kitchen once, called it heritage cooking, and I smiled because some things are easier to let pass than to correct. She asked about my journey, the word rolling in her mouth like a brand partnership. I answered with the old verbs, worked, saved, prayed, stitched. She listened and then edited most of it out. In her final cut, my hands looked graceful and my home looks smaller than it is. That's what presentation does. Shrinks the inconvenient and polishes the rest. When she and Marcus announced their engagement, my first reaction was relief disguised as joy. Relief because marriage, to me, still sounds like two people promising not to run when the other person falls. Joy because my son has a soft spot that worries me. I hoped love would cover it without exploiting it. I called Alina from the front steps. "We're doing this," I told her, laughter and fear braided together. "We are," she said. "How can I help?" And there it was again, the handrail, not a staircase, not an elevator, just something to grip while you climb. She offered a contribution from her foundation to ease the start. She didn't say the number. She never did, not to me. She dealt with vendors and accountants, left me to handle the intangibles, the recipes and the tone, the guest list braided with ghosts and obligations. "Take what you need," she said that day, "and remember the rest is not yours to carry." I wish I could say I held the line cleanly, but money has a way of inviting opinions into your house. With each invoice Olivia approved, each whisper of elevated and aspirational, I felt that old, invisible ledger open on the table. the one where every kindness becomes a line item and every decision needs a receipt. I told no one how much I sold the Buick for. I told no one about the meeting at the credit union, the manager's familiar, kind eyes. The way she said, "Miss Johnson, this is a community note. Pay it when you can." I smiled like a person walking on a narrow bridge, nodding to the river as if we were friends. "Did you tell them about my help?" Elena asked now, stirring her coffee. She meant the large help, the part that let us pretend the budget was only ambitious, not impossible. "I told them you believed in our family," I said. "I told them you loved a good party." She laughed at that. "I do. I didn't tell them the number," I added. "I wanted their gratitude pointed at the right people." "And who are the right people?" "Themselves," I said, surprising us both. "I want them to be proud of the part they paid in sweat and patience, not in dollars, in showing up." Elena regarded me for a long moment. "Loretta," she said, "money is only ever a tool. Some folks make it a shrine. Others pretend it doesn't exist. You know better than both. You know it's a hammer. It can build. It can bruise." We fell quiet again, the way people do when a truth has been pinned to the table between them and is still wriggling. The doorbell rang a second time that morning. I knew before I opened the door that it would not be Maya. She texts first, or Marcus. He doesn't come early. Olivia stood on the stoop, sunglasses even though the sun hadn't yet decided what to do, a scent like a department store trailing her. She removed the glasses with the timing of a scene partner who trusts her lighting. "MS, Loretta," she said, teeth bright. "Can we talk?" Elena rose, but I touched her wrist. "Stay," I said, "please." Olivia's gaze flicked to Elena, did a quick calculus, then recalibrated her tone. "We're all on the same team," she said, as if she'd been born with a laminated media plan in her pocket. She stepped inside and looked around my kitchen like a location scout. "I wanted to make sure we're aligned," she began. "There's been tension. Online chatter." She waved a hand, as if rumor were a fly that only bothered other people. "I think transparency will be key moving forward." I poured her coffee because my mother would haunt me if I didn't. She wrapped both hands around the mug the way influencers do when they want to look candid. "Marcus is under so much pressure," she continued. "The partnership inquiries, the expectations, we want everything to be perfect." "Perfect," I repeated. The word sat in my mouth like a marble. "That's why last night the vibe, the brand, it just skewed young. We didn't want you to feel out of place." She said it with an earnestness that would have been touching if it weren't so carefully staged. Elena watched me. She did not intervene. That was our agreement since the bus stop. She would steady, not steer. "Out of place," I said finally. "Child, I've been out of place in this country longer than you've been alive. I can handle it." Olivia's smile faltered, then returned, smaller. "Of course, it's just optics, you know?" "I do," I said. "I know optics better than you think." I turned to Elena. "You remember when you offered to help with the engagement?" "I do," she said. Olivia leaned forward, catching onto the thread she wanted to pull. "Yes, about that. I was hoping we could discuss reallocating some of the funds. A branded after-party opportunity came up. It would be huge for Marcus's profile." "Reallocating whose funds?" I asked. "The foundation's contribution," she said, brightening. "It would be such a strategic pivot." Elena's eyebrows did a small, polite thing that meant absolutely not, but she looked at me instead of speaking. That was her kindness to me, letting me own my own house. "No," I said simply. Olivia blinked. "I don't think you understand the upside." "I understand the difference between help and control," I said. "We will not spend charity to buy a louder microphone." She pushed back her chair then, a little scrape of indignation on my floor. "I'm just trying to make sure Marcus's life is perfect," I said again. "I heard you." She stood but didn't move to the door. "He loves you," she said, and in that moment the performance slid off her face and I saw a very young woman who thought love was light you could turn on with the right switch. "He wants to make you proud." "Pride isn't a flower wall," I said. "It's a table that hasn't missed a seat in 20 years." She opened her mouth, closed it, then slipped the sunglasses back on like armor. "We'll talk later," she said and left. I set her untouched coffee in the sink. Elena exhaled. "You did well." "I didn't shake," I said. "It felt like a small miracle." "She will come back," Elena said. "Some people hear no as an invitation to negotiate." "I'm not negotiating my dignity," I said. "Not with my money, not with yours." We sat a while longer, two old women in a kitchen that had taught us how to hold the line and pass the salt. Before she left, Elena touched the door frame, the way some people touch a mezuzah. "The day will come," she said softly, "when you'll set a boundary with the one you love most. Practice now. Your heart needs the muscle memory." After she was gone, I washed the 3 mugs and let them dry upside down like little domes. The phone buzzed a confession of texts and missed calls, but I didn't look. I wrote a single sentence on the first page of a fresh notebook. No one buys your dignity with their generosity. Under it, I added another. And no one spends your love without asking your permission. Out on the street, a kid on a bike swerved around a puddle and laughed at the success of it. The sun finally made up its mind and punched through the cloud. I wiped the table, ran a hand over the wood worn smooth by elbows and school projects and arguments and prayers. In the grain of it, I could feel the thread that had run from the bus stop to this very morning, the one that said, "Debt is numbers, but what we owe each other is a different math." I picked up the phone then, not to read, not to answer, but to dial Maya. When she said, "Hey, Ma," I heard the small relief in her voice and fed it mine. We made plans to meet after work. I didn't tell her about Olivia or the canceled contracts or the way my hands had steadied. I would tell her soon. But first I wanted one ordinary thing, lunch with my daughter that tasted like we had more time than trouble. Before I left the house, I closed the notebook and slid it into my bag. Some women carry lipstick. I carry a sentence. The week after Olivia left my kitchen, the city put on its brave face again. Sunlight on bus roofs, kids trading jokes with their backpacks slung like futures, neighbors nodding in the code of people who know the rent is due, on the first no matter how the world behaves. I took the bus to the river because I needed to see where all that talk of elevated and aspirational would land. Riverside lofts sat in a curve of water like a good ring sits on a lucky finger. Glass everywhere, brick made to look like it remembered the past but had moved on, chandeliers that fell from the ceiling like expensive rain. A young woman named Kara met me with a tablet and a smile that could survive a power outage. "MS. Johnson, we're so excited to host your family," she chirped. "We loved your son's story. Olivia sent over the media packet. The week after Olivia left my kitchen, the city put on its brave face again. Sunlight on bus roofs, kids trading jokes with their backpacks slung like futures, neighbors nodding in the code of people who know the rent is due on the first no matter how the world behaves." I took the bus to the river because I needed to see where all that talk of elevated and aspirational would land. Riverside lofts sat in a curve of water like a good ring sits on a lucky finger. Glass everywhere, brick made to look like it remembered the past but had moved on, chandeliers that fell from the ceiling like expensive rain. A young woman named Kara met me with a tablet and a smile that could survive a power outage. "MS. Johnson, we're so excited to host your family," she chirped. "We loved your son's story. Olivia sent over the media packet." Media packet. The first time someone called my child a story. He was 7 and had brought home a science fair ribbon that smelled like glue. Now his story had a palette and a font. We walked through the space while Kara narrated like a realtor of dreams. "Here's where the floral clouds would be installed. This corner photographs like a magazine cover. The terrace is perfect for your dramatic moment, maybe a sparkler exit." She tapped numbers into her tablet the way a slot machine does when it's sure you're hooked. I smiled and asked practical questions. How many chairs could fit without elbows becoming enemies? How much extra if Rain decided not to RSVP? Where would the elders sit if the party skewed young again? She answered kindly and moved the conversation back to light. Always the light. The kind you capture but never own. Olivia arrived halfway through the tour, camera crew in miniature tow, 2 kids in black with whispers for voices and lenses for eyes. "MS. Loretta," she sang, offering air kisses I left hanging on the wind. "You're going to die when you see the mock-ups. They are insane." I didn't want to die, I wanted to sit. But I followed them to a long table where someone had arranged fabric swatches like a hymn. White upon white, bone, pearl, ivory, chalk. I never knew how many names there were for not quite color. Beside the fabrics lay a book heavy enough to press flowers with. Sample menus, centerpieces, place settings. At the foot of the table, a number weighted the way a consequence does, patient, sure of itself. Kara flipped her tablet to face us. "Okay, based on your preferences, here's version A. Full floral installation, custom draping, 10-piece band, aerial champagne pour, very old Hollywood, and our top-tier coordination package. That puts us at," she paused the way performers do before a big note, "120,000. Olivia clapped. "That's the one," she said, as if there were prizes for picking the highest number without fainting. "And version B?" I asked, voice level. "Scaled back lighting, fewer florals, 7-piece band, no aerial pour," Kara said. 92. There was also a version C which they treated the way some people treat side dishes, polite to mention, embarrassed to serve. I read every line of it like scripture no one quotes in public. Olivia pointed out details. "See the peonies here? They open like narratives, and this font clean but with warmth." She leaned so close to the tablet that her reflection blurred. Also, the content potential? Massive content potential. I wondered what kind of content my mother would have made if someone had filmed her ironing our church clothes. Would hearts have floated up the screen while she pressed the crease sharper with the heel of her hand? Kara turned to me. We'll need deposits today to lock vendors. Florist, band, lighting, venue. Olivia and Marcus have already earmarked some items from their side. She smiled. This will be unforgettable. Unforgettable, I thought, is Affordable's cousin who never pays rent. I signed things names I'd practiced in better contexts. The pen felt heavier with each initial. When the meeting ended, Olivia hugged me for the camera. You're an angel, she whispered in a tone meant for microphones. We'll make you proud. I walked out into a sky that was too beautiful to be that expensive. The river kept being a river no matter what people did beside it. I chose the long way home, stopping at the lot where the Buick still sat under a thin veil of dust. The man at Southside Auto waved when he saw me. We'd been hugging and letting go of this car for weeks. I can give you an extra $300 if I don't have to detail it, he said, kindness camouflaged as business. I got a buyer who likes the old smell, says it reminds him of his dad. It reminds me of mine, I said, and we both looked at the car like it might say something to break the spell. It didn't. I signed the title and pressed my palm against the roof one last time. The metal was sun-warm. Calvin and I had driven to emergency rooms and picnics in that car. Marcus had learned to parallel park with me sweating prayers beside him. Maya had cried in the back seat after her first heartbreak and tried to leave the tears there so she wouldn't have to carry them inside. Thank you, I told the car. Then I told the man selling it. Some gratitude needs 2 addresses. From the lot, I walked to the community credit union. Miss Denise at the front desk greeted me like a niece. MS. Johnson, she said, sliding a peppermint across the counter the way people used to pass notes in class. You here for the community note? Yes, ma'am. The phrase made my throat warm. Community note, like we'd pinned my need to a bulletin board where neighbors could see it and answer if they wanted. In truth, it was simply a small loan at terms that didn't punish you for being poor and honest. She pulled out forms. You know the drill. 2 signatures, your proof of income, and a promise you've already kept 100 times. I'll keep it again, I said. This one's for the kids. It always is, she smiled. We know who the good bets are. When I stepped back into the afternoon, my bag was heavier and my future lighter by an equal measure. I caught the bus home and shifted my weight as we jostled over potholes, my back sending telegrams up my spine, my heart translating them into get there. Maya's keys jingled in the door just as I set the grocery bags down. Ma, she called, the way you call when your hands are full of life. She came into the kitchen in her school lanyard and a t-shirt that said read like your life depends on it. She dropped a stack of composition books on the table and peered at me. You eat yet? I nibble, I said. You? She tossed me an apple. Teachers don't eat. We inhale whatever we can chew between bells. She bit into hers and watched me the way a daughter watches the weather. You okay? I'm fine, I said, and my back cracked its knuckles at the lie. She moved behind me, hands on my shoulders the way she used to when she was little and wanted to climb me like a tree. You're tight, she said, pressing a thumb into the stubborn knot where worry stores itself. Did you go down to the river? MMHMM. And it's very young, I said, and we both laughed, the kind of laugh that keeps grief from settling in. Her hands paused, then slid lower. Your spine's inflamed, she said. Did you sign more papers? I didn't answer right away. She didn't need me to. She went to the counter, lifted my bag, and returned with the folder. She doesn't snoop, she witnesses. She paged through the contracts, the receipts. She stopped at the credit union envelope, then at the auto sales slip. Her face didn't crumple, it settled. Ma, she said softly, we didn't ask you to do this. You didn't have to, I said. You're my children. She looked at me the way a young woman looks at the version of herself 40 years from now and decides whether to thank or warn her. Marcus has a good salary. Olivia has brands throwing money like confetti. Why are you the one selling the Buick? Because I know how to turn a car into a celebration, I said. They know how to turn a celebration into content. She gave me the teacher look then, the one that asks for more without making you feel graded. Say what you mean, Ma. I set the apple down. I want my son's happiness, I told her, each word a plank. Not to decorate it. I don't want to buy lighting that will overexpose what matters. Maya sat, hands wrapped around her apple core, one elbow on the table we'd done homework and taxes at. Does Marcus know? Some, I said, enough to sleep well. And Olivia knows the numbers, not the costs. Maya leaned in, elbows mirrored to mine. We can't keep translating love into invoices, she said. There has to be another language. There is, I said. Acts of service, forgiveness, showing up. And showing out? She asked, a smile tugging her mouth. We'll let someone else pay for that, I said. She nodded slowly. I'm with you, Ma, but I need you to be with you. She tapped my lower back light as a metronome. This is not a renewable resource. I'll rest, I promised. When? After, I said. She rolled her eyes and stood to rinse our mugs. You know after is a town no one ever gets to, right? I smiled. Your students must hate you, you're always right. They hate math, she said. Especially the kind that counts the wrong things. The door buzzed, then Marcus. He came in warm with apology, eyes doing that soft pleading they did when he wanted an extension on curfew at 16. Mom, he said, taking my hands as if a hug might startle me into stubbornness. I heard about deposits, thank you. We'll make it back to you after the campaign. Olivia has a sponsorship brewing. This isn't a ledger between us, I said. Sit, eat an apple. He did, obedient as only sons are in their mother's kitchens. Maya watched him the way a sister watches both what she loves and what it might do. We want you to be happy, she said to him. I am, he said, mostly. Mostly is where trouble hides, Maya replied. He looked at me. We're close, Mom, it's just there's momentum. When people expect big, you can't show up small. Sometimes small is honest, I said. Honest photographs better in the heart. He smiled at that, tired and true. I hear you. Do you? Maya asked. He reached across and squeezed her fingers. I'm trying. Then he turned to me. And thank you for everything you do that no one sees. They don't need to see it, I said. They need to feel the results. After he left for a meeting and Maya went to grade papers, I lay down with a heating pad and stared at the ceiling fan doing its small, faithful circles. Numbers slid across the back of my eyelids, deposits, balances, dates. Between them ran another math. Minutes I still owed my body, boundaries I owed myself, love I owed no receipt for. Toward evening, I got up and began a pot of red beans. The onion surrendered to the pan like someone finally telling the truth. I tasted, adjusted, waited. This is what cooking has taught me. Timing is not the same as schedule, heat is not the same as pressure, and salt, added in the end, can save more dishes than it ruins. My phone buzzed with a video from Olivia, a dress fitting under light so generous it made even hangers beautiful. She twirled. The gown was a color with 3 names. Thoughts, she captioned, followed by 6 hearts and a star. I wrote back, you look lovely. Remember to breathe. I put the phone down and stirred. In the window, my reflection and the street braided together. The neighbor boy practicing a jump shot, my jaw set to an angle Calvin would have recognized, the sky easing toward evening. Somewhere in the city a contract printed, somewhere else a florist sent an invoice, the river kept being a river. I turned off the stove and set 3 bowls, an old habit I didn't plan to break, one for me, one for the ghost of a man who still steadies the house, and one for whatever boundary I would need tomorrow. Boundaries eat too. If you starve them, they faint at the worst times. 2 days later, the video bloomed across the internet the way mold blooms when your back is turned. It began as a glossy minute of behind the scenes, Olivia gliding through riverside lofts in a silk slip, a voiceover purring about elevated storytelling and curating a life you love. Then came the line that tripped a wire. One of her assistants, off camera, joked about keeping things South Side chic, minus the South Side, and everyone laughed. The laugh was soft, almost apologetic, but microphones are better at catching truth than intention. By lunchtime, the comments multiplied. Tiny avatars with big opinions. Wow, that minus says a lot. Funny how you love our food and music, not our zip code. Elevated, or just edited. Others defended her, she didn't mean it like that. Stop being sensitive, as if the wound should apologize to the knife. My phone hummed like a bee trapped in a jar. Maya texted, don't read it, which is how I knew exactly what it said. At the corner store, Mr. Patel slid my change across the counter, fingers lingering. You're Marcus's mother, he said gently, as if he were breaking news to me. People like the video, people don't like it too. Internet is a confused place. So is the world, I replied. On the bus home, a girl in braids scrolled her feed and turned the screen toward her friend. See, that's the venue. My cousin said it's like a movie set, but why she gotta say that part? Her friend shrugged the way you shrug when you're not surprised but still disappointed. I looked out the window and watched the pages of other people's judgments flutter down. By afternoon, Olivia had posted a clarification in lowercase letters with pastel hearts. We celebrate all parts of Chicago. Sorry for any hurt feelings. We're learning and growing. The caption looked like an apology, the way a pageant wave looks like a hello. Then she went live, blinking into the camera, crying pretty, talking about nuance and context. Comments poured faster. The brands called her. Olivia texted Marcus. Marcus called me. Mom, he started, voice thin with careful. It's loud online right now. We're just trying to manage optics until it passes. Optics, I repeated, the word a pebble rolling in my mouth. You want me to sit this part out? Oh, he said too quickly, then softer. Maybe just be low-key for a while. The rehearsal dinner, the content shoots. Olivia thinks we should, keep the frame tight. It's also public. People will twist whatever they see. Frames are honest, I said. They show what you decide belongs. He sighed, the kind of exhale that fogs glass. Mom, I'm in meetings all day trying to keep opportunities from falling through. Can we talk later? I love you. I know, I said, and let him go so he could save what he thought could be saved. That evening, Maya came over with a foil pan of baked ziti and her teacher voice set to "Don't try me." We ate from the pan with forks like college roommates because sometimes plates feel like ceremony and you can't stand ceremony. If Olivia posts one more pastel heart apology, I'm confiscating her ring light, Maya muttered, stabbing a noodle. Also, if anyone says learning and growing to avoid saying I was wrong, I'm assigning them detention. I smiled despite myself. Detention is full, I said. The world over and rolled. Maya brushed crumbs from her lap. What did Marcus say? That he's chasing optics, I answered. I told him to chase character. Mom, she began and then stopped. She reached for my hand. It's not just the internet, it's shame, the oldest American export. Olivia wants the trappings without the roots. She wants the beat without the blues. She wants a wedding that won't embarrass the sponsors, I said softly. Then she should marry the sponsors, Maya snapped, then winced at her own line. Sorry, that was cheap. It wasn't, I said. It was too expensive. We washed the pan and let it dry. I made tea. The house settled into that deep evening quiet where the walls exhale. I was measuring sugar when the doorbell rang. Olivia stood there in a sweatshirt with her own name on it, hair scraped into a ponytail, eyes rimmed red not from crying but from the decision to look like she had been. MS. Loretta, she said, stepping inside because pretty people are used to doors being porous. I wanted to talk about seating. Seating, I repeated, pouring tea into a mug and not offering it. The chairs? The arrangement, she said, pulling out her phone. A diagram glowed. Tables labeled like constellations. We're thinking of a VIP content corner, better light, clean background, fewer variables. The elders, she glanced up as if to see if I'd flinch, would be more comfortable in the lounge. Sofas, lower volume, intimate. Intimate as an off-camera, Maya said from the doorway, arms crossed, eyebrows doing the work her mouth wanted to do. Olivia brightened. Exactly. It's more authentic. You know how older folks don't like the noise. Maya laughed without humor. Our mother worked night shifts next to machines that screamed. She can handle a DJ. Olivia toggled screens, soldiering on. Also, sponsors have requested a cleaner aesthetic. We're steering away from certain narratives. It's better if the spotlight stays focused. On what? I asked. She swallowed. On the couple. And the brand, Meyer added. Olivia's chin lifted a notch, a reflex of someone who has been told posture can save you. Look, I'm trying to protect everyone here. People online are looking for something to dissect. If we keep things contained, we control the story. You don't control stories, I said. You host them, they leave when they're ready. For a second, her eyes softened. Then the mask slid back. So, we're agreed the lounge is best. We are not agreed, Maya said. Olivia's gaze returned to me. She always came back to the camera that mattered. MS. Loretta, I love Marcus. I want this to be perfect. I need you to trust that I know how to make that happen. Perfect is expensive in the wrong currencies, I said. And trust is not a coupon code. She blew out a breath and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the universal sign for the hard part then. Okay, there's one more thing. The content team is recommending that the rehearsal dinner stay, you know. She searched for the softest rock to hide under. Young, less intergenerational, cleaner lines. Maya clapped once like a teacher restoring order. Say the sentence, Olivia. Olivia's mouth made the shape of mercy. We think it might be best if older family members join for a separate celebration. More meaningful, less pressure, no cameras. There it was, the quiet of being erased. Not loud, not cruel, just neat. I felt the room contract the way a heart does when it skips, then pretends it didn't. I set the spoon down and leaned on the counter because I am 61 and I have earned leaning. When I was your age, I said, I thought my job was to make people comfortable. Now I know my job is to keep them honest. I wiped my hands on a dish towel that has cleaned more messes than Olivia has posted. I will not be uninvited from the life I paid for. Her eyes flashed. But you didn't, I mean, the foundation. My money, Aliner's money, help is not a backstage pass, I said. It doesn't come with conditions you make up later because the comments got mean. Something in her hardened. I'm trying to protect the brand, she said. Marcus's brand, my brand, all of it. The only brand I recognize in this house, Maya said, is Johnson. It's stitched with work and held with bread. It doesn't fray when strangers are loud. Olivia's phone buzzed on the counter. The screen flashed a sponsor's name, the kind that pays for color palettes and second chances. She stared at it, then at me, then at the door. I need to go, she said. We'll figure out details later. She paused, trying on a gentler voice. I want you there, MS, Loretta. I do. I want the night to feel like us. Then make it feel like family, I said. Not a photo shoot. She left with the quick efficiency of someone who has practiced exits. The house inhaled when the door closed. Maya came to stand beside me, shoulder to shoulder. We watched steam lift from the tea kettle like a ghost deciding whether to stay. Are you okay? She asked. I am steady, I said, using a leaner's word because it fit. We were loading the dishwasher when my phone buzzed again. Marcus. Mom, I'm so sorry about earlier. Olivia's stressed. Let's do something special, just us, next week. Tonight's dinner is better kept youthful. We'll have a beautiful brunch for you, promise. Love you. The sentence was polite, clean, and airbrushed, like the first one. It scrolled over the last inches of my patience and asked me to just be reasonable. Brunch. The consolation prize of people who don't want you in the picture but need you in the album. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I wiped my hands and wrote back. Thank you for telling me the truth with nice words. I'll make other plans. I did not add a heart. I set the phone face down. Maya read my face before I could compose it. Do you want me to rage or to listen? Both, I said, and we laughed because choosing is for people with less history than us. We sat at the table with our tea cooling into honesty. Here's what's going to happen, I said to the air, as much to myself as to Maya. They will keep the frame tight until the world calms down. They will tell themselves it's temporary. They will tell me love is separate from logistics. They will say we'll celebrate properly later. I wrapped my hands around the mug, and I will be expected to fund the meantime. Maya took a sip, eyes on mine. And what do you want to happen? I want to stop writing checks that buy my absence, I said. The sentence rang in the room like a small bell. Night came fully then, bringing with it the hush that makes decisions easier to hear. I cleaned the counter until it shone back a woman who looked a little older than last week and a little more herself. Somewhere, a notification pinged. Somewhere else, a comment thread burned out like a short wick. In our kitchen, the only light that mattered was the one above the sink. The kind you switch on when you have work to do and turn off when you're finished. I reached for my notebook and wrote, if the story can't hold me, it won't hold my money. Then I added, smaller, the day will come when I stop financing my own erasure. I closed the cover and slid it under the sugar jar. Some truths deserve a place among the everyday. When Maya left, she kissed my cheek twice, the old way, once for me and once for the woman I still carry. I locked the door and stood for a moment in the quiet, the hum of the refrigerator steady as a promise. The rehearsal dinner would go on without me, glossy and young, every angle considered. Let it. In the morning, I would do what I always do. Brew coffee, count blessings, and sharpen my boundaries. If there is anything I have learned about light, it's this. It shows you what is there, but it also shows you what is missing. Tomorrow, I would decide what the room should look like without me in a corner no one filmed. Morning slid in like it had somewhere else to be. I brewed coffee, buttered toast I didn't taste, and set my notebook on the table as if it were a small altar. The words I'd written the night before stared back at me, plain as bread, firm as a door latch. If the story can't hold me, it won't hold my money. I opened the folder from the venue and began the quiet work of unbraiding a party from my life. Contracts are peculiar creatures. They pretend to be about flowers and music, but really they are about time, power, and who gets to say enough. I traced the signature lines with my finger the way a child might trace a maze. Client, Loretta M. Johnson, authorized signatory. Same. An odd kind of intimacy, seeing your name repeated more often than your birthday in a single stack of paper. The penalty schedules were printed in tidy columns, percentages that climbed like ivy the closer you got to the date. Venue, forfeiture of deposit plus staffing fees. Florist, cost of blooms already ordered, labor minimums. Band, retainer non-refundable, remaining balance waived if canceled 72 hours prior. We were at 96. Lighting, restocking fees for custom gels, who knew light needed outfits. Catering, ingredients and prep at cost, gratuity not applicable upon cancellation, gratuity, a word that suddenly felt like a mercy. I made a list down the left side of the page, venue, florist, band, lighting, caterer, and on the right, I wrote one word I'd need for each call, polite. Not because they deserved it, not because I was scared of being called difficult, but because I wanted to leave the day with my own voice still clean. Before I dialed, I called Alina. She picked up on the second ring, the rhythm of a person who doesn't pretend to be busier than they are. "I'm going to pull the plug," I said. "Do you need a rope or a witness?" she asked. "A witness." "I'm here," she said, which was her way of stepping back so I could step forward. I started with Riverside Lofts. Kara answered, her cheerfulness intact. A storefront window before the storm. "MS. Johnson, we're finalizing timelines on our end. Do you have a moment to?" "I do," I said, and then I told her. Not the whole story, not the internet's version, not even the kitchen sink version. Just the simple truth: the event would not go forward under my contract. I understood the penalties and was prepared to meet them. I asked for confirmation in writing. There was the type of pause you can hear even over cell towers. Of course," she said carefully, as if she'd stepped into a room where the furniture had been rearranged in the dark. "I'll loop in accounting. We'll process the cancellation and itemize the charges due today." "Thank you," I said. "Email is fine." "Is there," she tried again, finding her script frayed at the edges, "anything we can do to keep your experience positive?" "My experience is mine," I said gently. "The invoice is yours." Next, the florist, a man named Dylan with a voice like compost, earth-rich, honest. "We've got peonies cutting tomorrow, MS. Johnson," he said, and I could hear he loved them the way you love a good choir. "I can't stop what the sun has started, but I can divert. There's a community art gala Friday. They could use the joy. We'll eat the labor. You'd only cover what we can't repurpose." "Send them," I said. "Make somebody's hallway feel like a poem." The band leader was a woman named Robin who called me ma'am like we were on a porch. "I'm sorry to lose the gig," she said, "but I'm sorrier for whatever's making you call me. We'll keep the retainer, and that's that. If you ever need it last for back porch anniversary, we'll bring it cheap." Lighting sounded like a graduate student who could rig sunrise in a broom closet. "We'll waive the gel fees," they said, on account of this being a lot. Catering was a man in a kitchen, pans clattering in the background like applause. "We've prepped half," he said. "I'll donate to the shelter. You cover ingredients. Nobody loses eating, MS Johnson." "Bless you," I said and meant it. Between calls, I drank water and stretched my back the way Maya had taught me, arms over my head, palms up like surrender, then down, touching the table as if to say here is the ground. With each conversation, a knot loosened. With each confirmation email, something settled that had been rattling. I put the folder away and made another list, this one short and shaped like a prayer. Tell Marcus, text Maya, turn off the phone, make lunch. I wrote tell and not ask because I am past the age where my boundaries need permission slips. I called Marcus. He answered on the first ring, breathless like he'd sprinted between meetings and love. "Mom, I've canceled the event under my contract," I said. "Vendors have been notified. Penalties are in process. If you and Olivia wish to proceed on your own, you'll need a new agreement with the venue." Silence. Then the sound of a chair scraping, the fabric of a suit rediscovering gravity. "You canceled." "Yes." "Mom," he said, voice pitched to persuasion, "this is a misunderstanding we can fix. Olivia's statement is up. The comments will move on." "Sponsors." "This is not about the comments," I said. "This is about a sentence that uninvited me from a life I was asked to fund. Money can buy flowers. It cannot buy my absence." He tried all the doors, regret, logistics, guilt, the old key named for me, please. "You can still come," he said at last, weakly. "We'll forget last night. We'll add you to the head table." "Baby," I said, the word the softest thing I own, "if a seat only exists after I pull a plug." "It isn't a seat, it's a prop." He exhaled a long, raw sound. "Do you want me to choose?" he asked, bare as a man can be. "Between you and?" "No," I said. "I want you to see. You don't have to decide what you can't see." He went quiet, which is how I knew he was, in fact, looking. Not at invoices or optics, but at the distance between the boy whose knees I bandaged and the man whose calendar had eaten his voice. "Will you hate me if we go ahead?" he asked finally. I closed my eyes and pictured the river doing what a river does, proceeding without becoming somebody else's mirror. "I don't do hatred," I said. "It's too expensive. I will be sad. That is cheaper and truer." "Mom," he whispered, "I'm sorry." "I know," I said, because he was. "Now go be where you need to be. I love you." That part doesn't cancel. When we hung up, I texted Maya, pulled the plug. "Vendors kind. Marcus human. I'm making grilled cheese and soup. Come if you can." She replied with 3 words that felt like a braid. "On my way." I turned my phone off. The quiet was not empty, it was crowded with relief. While butter melted in the skillet, I thought about money the way you think about an old injury. You remember the lesson, not just the pain. Money had taught me to count. Boundaries had taught me to keep. Together they had made me someone who could sign her name and, if necessary, unsign a fantasy. The door opened and Meyer entered with the weather. She kicked her shoes off like a kid and hugged me from behind, her cheek between my shoulder blades. "Proud of you," she said into the cotton of my shirt, words warming my back the way a heating pad can't. We ate at the table, dipping sandwiches into soup like we were dunking questions for answers. I told her about Dylan and the peonies, Robin and the porch, the caterer and the shelter. She laughed at gel fees and shook her head at elevated. "You know what's elevated?" she said. "Your blood pressure when someone tries you." After lunch, she washed pans and narrated like a sportscaster. And Loretta the Boundary Johnson pulls another plate from the sink, flawless technique, places it in the rack. "Ladies and gentlemen, she is not here to play. Sometimes your child makes you young right when you feel ancient. Sometimes you let them." When she left for her afternoon shift, the apartment took a deep breath, and so did I. I cleaned the table, wiped a small ring of coffee as if it were a bad idea to be erased, then sat down and wrote 2 letters by hand. The first was to the Community Credit Union. "Dear Miss Denise, the event is canceled. The note stands. I'll keep my promise." The second was to myself. "Dear Loretta, your spine is not a budget line." By late afternoon, emails had arrived with subject lines that sounded like verdicts. Confirmation of cancellation, final balance, receipt of donation. I printed them and slid them into the folder. Paper has weight, so does closure. Near dusk, the sky turned the color of old pewter, and the first drop hit the window, sharp, declarative. Rain has always been my husband's language, and that night I took it as a sign that the house would survive the storm. Then the phone, newly powered, began its other work. Calls stacked. Marcus, unknown, Olivia, Riverside Lofts, Marcus again. I let them ring. I have learned that not every alarm signals a fire. Some announce a rehearsal. On the 7th call, I answered because love makes rules and then breaks its own. "MS. Johnson," Olivia said, brightness chipped, breath too quick. "Kara just emailed. There must be some mistake." "There isn't," I said. "But the activations, the partners, Marcus's." She stopped, regrouped. "I understand you're hurt. I really do. We will make it up to you. Brunch. Content dedicated to you. A scholarship in your name." I held the phone away for a heartbeat so I wouldn't send anger into her ear. When I brought it back, my voice was the temperature of rain on warm concrete. "Olivia, I don't need a ribbon tied around my absence. I need my presence not to be treated like a problem to solve." "You're punishing Marcus," she said, and there it was, the accusation dressed as concern. "I'm teaching him," I said, "and I'm protecting myself." "You're sabotaging our life." "If your life can be sabotaged by my refusal to pay for a room I'm not welcome in," I said, "it needs sturdier beams." She made a sound like a door rattling against a lock and hung up without goodbye. The phone rang again, immediately unknown. I let it go to voicemail. Then again, Marcus. I answered and said only, "I love you. We can try again at being family after tonight, not at being content." He cried a little then, the way grown men do, quietly, quickly, like they've been taught to hide the parts of themselves that prove they're still human. I listened until the sobs turned into breathing and the breathing into silence. Then we said goodnight. The rain deepened. I turned on the lamp above the sink and left the living room dark. The kitchen glowed like a lighthouse for exactly one ship. I took the peony donation email from the folder and put it on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a pear. Diverted to South Side Arts Gala, it read. It felt right that something beautiful would bloom in a room where the only camera belonged to memory. Before bed, I wrote one more sentence in the notebook, the ink a little wobbly from the day. "A boundary is not a wall. It is a door with a lock and my name on the key." I closed the cover and slid it beneath the pepper shaker this time. Boundaries should season everything. When I lay down, the phone lit the ceiling with a pale square. I turned it face down, closed my eyes, and let the storm say its piece. Tomorrow would likely bring the sound of 50 missed calls and a city of opinions. Let it. Tonight my house was a quiet fact, and I was the woman who lived in it. Steady, signed, paid up, and not for sale. The storm kept its promise. By evening, rain stitched the city into one wet sheet, taxi lights smeared into ribbons, and the lake wore the same gray as the sky, as if both had run out of names for themselves. I left the living room dark and let the kitchen lamp throw a small circle of yellow, the kind of light a person can sit inside without feeling observed. The phone started its percussion early. Unknown, Marcus, Olivia, unknown. I let each ring finish its sentence. Somewhere on the river, under chandeliers that pretended to be stars, there was a rehearsal dinner that would do its work without me. Rehearse love, rehearse vows, rehearse the habit of making other people disappear with soft words. The rain gave the night a soundtrack. It sounded like courage cooling. By 9, the knocking began. Not the polite kind, not the package on the porch kind, but the knock of someone who has discovered his voice is smaller than his fear and is trying to make up the difference with his hands. Mom. Marcus stood in the hallway, hair plastered to his forehead, suit jacket darkened almost black, rainwater collecting on his lashes like he'd learned to cry in the weather's handwriting. Behind him, footsteps receded. A neighbor's door opened, then closed. I stepped aside and he came in, dripping apology on the floor I'd mopped after lunch. He didn't hug me. He stood staring at my table, the folder, the notebook, the mug that said world's okayest cook because Maya had once thought that was the funniest thing a mug could say. He took a breath. The room took it with him. They're saying you canceled everything. It wasn't a question, but he waited the way people wait when they need the world to be a different shape than it is. I did, I said. He nodded like a man who just found the bottom of a staircase in the dark with the front of his shin. He pulled out a chair and sat, then stood, then sat again. He wiped a wet hand across his face and laughed, short and wrong. You could have called me. I did, I said, for years. The words hung there, surprised that they'd finally been said aloud. He flinched, but he didn't run. Somewhere under the suit, the boy in hand-me-down cleats shifted his weight and met my eyes. Mom. He started, softer. It isn't what you think. It's not, they didn't mean to hurt you. We're at a point in our life, baby, I said, keeping my voice even so mine would not frighten his, where meaning to matters less than doing. You put a person in the lounge so the cameras won't have to adjust. That's a doing. He shook his head and water leapt from his hair. He looked startled by the mess he made. It's one night. It's a rehearsal, I said. Your dinner was named correctly. He paced now, a long rectangle of motion between stove and sink, the way Calvin used to when the bills were heavier than the paychecks. He touched the back of a chair, the dish towel loop, my refrigerator magnet pair, as if the objects might offer a different argument than he had found in his own head. Everything is moving, Mom. Deals, timelines, people are watching. We're trying to keep it all from going sideways. He swallowed. I'm trying to keep it. Keep what? Asked. It was not a trick. It was the only honest question I could think to ask in a room full of unhonest ones. He opened his hands. Momentum. I remembered the first time he rode a bike without training wheels, how he had pedaled too fast and then yelled at his speed as if it were something outside him. I had run beside him then, hand hovering at his back, knowing there is a moment when your palm must lift or else neither of you will ever learn the balance you came for. You can't keep momentum, I said. You can only ride it. Sometimes it carries you somewhere you didn't choose. He stopped pacing and turned to me like a man looking for a lighthouse and finding only his mother. I need you to understand, he said, and the words came out in the tense of a plea. This partnership, this life, Olivia's under scrutiny. We both are. The comments, the brands, they make everything feel like an exam you can fail with one wrong answer. He rubbed his forehead with the heel of his hand. I thought if we tightened the night, if we kept things clean, we could get through it. Clean, I repeated. That's the word you use when you want to hide the mess you made by not telling the truth. He pressed his lips together and I saw Calvin in the set of his jaw. I saw myself, too, in the stubbornness that had saved and endangered us in equal measure. I'm not trying to hurt you, he said. You are trying to not hurt other things, I said, and they are in front of me in your line of sight. He looked down, then out the window where rain wrote fast cursive. We put your name on the head table, he said weakly, as if moving a card were the same as making room. I walked to the sink and turned the kettle on, more for the comfort of its gentle seethe than for the tea. You can put my name anywhere, baby, I said. I won't be in a room where my presence is a problem you solve after a sponsorship call. He stood there and took the full weight of the sentence, the first time he'd done that he was 5 and had broken Maya's music box. He held the pieces and cried because he'd learned suddenly that some pasts didn't reassemble. I had sat on the linoleum and held him and told him this is what we do. We live with the missing thing and keep singing anyway. Now my son was a man who could afford to buy 10 music boxes, and the lesson was the same. You think I'm ashamed? He said. He didn't make it a question. Courage turns statements into mirrors. I think you are afraid, I said, and fear wears whatever coat is handy. Tonight it put on shame and called itself optics. He swallowed again. I don't want to be the man who. Then don't, I said. I don't want to be the woman who finances him. We let that sit between us like a wet umbrella. I poured hot water over a tea bag, handed him the mug, and watched steam fog his glasses. He took them off, wiped them on his jacket sleeve, and said the thing sons say when they've run out of motions to fix what words have broken. You're ruining my life. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because he had finally reached the line all our arguments eventually circle. If your life can be ruined by your mother refusing to pay for a chair in a corner, then your life is a house made of flyers. He laughed despite himself, then sighed. You always talk in metaphors. They're cheaper than chandeliers, I said, and they light up more rooms. We stood there, the kettle clicking itself into quiet, the storm shouldering the windows. He took a sip and flinched at the heat. What would it take? He asked after a long time. Not to undo what's done, to move forward. I thought of 1,000 soft answers, of the way mothers are trained to fold themselves into shapes that fit any kind of sorrow. Then I chose the answer that would still be true in the morning. A real apology, I said. Not from your PR, from your mouth. And a promise from both of you that my place in your life isn't negotiable when a camera shows up. That's a start, not an end. He held the mug with both hands like it might be an oath. And if that doesn't happen, then I will still be your mother and you will still be my son, and we will learn the shape of that without parties for a while. He nodded slowly, as if the word while had revealed itself to be longer than he'd hoped. He set the mug down and walked to the window, put his palm on the glass like he could press the rain back into the sky. I miss Dad, he said quietly. He would know how to make this simple. Your father would make a pot of coffee and a bad joke, and then he would tell you the only simple thing. Do right, not easy, I said. And then he would hold your coat while you did it. He turned, the boy and the man both present at once. Would he have canceled? Your father would have canceled the minute someone tried to move his mother to a lounge, I said. He would have fixed every leak in this building and then dragged the DJ outside to play for the block for free. I smiled at the picture and let it pass. We were quiet long enough that I heard the refrigerator's small hum, felt the house's sturdy bones do their slow, loyal work. He came back to the table, took the chair this time, and kept it. I don't know how to unwind what fear has made me, he said, voice low, but I don't want to keep becoming this. Good, I said. That's the most grown thing you've said tonight. My phone buzzed face down on the counter, the polite tap of a text that wanted to be a siren. He glanced toward it and I shook my head. Not now, let the world talk to itself for 5 minutes. He nodded, grateful for permission he hadn't known he needed. He looked at my folder, then at the pear magnet on the fridge. Peonies to the art gala? He asked, reading the subject line. Yes, I said. Beauty should not go to waste just because pride tripped over it. He smiled and I watched something unclench in his shoulders. He picked up the mug again, drank, winced less. I'm sorry, he said, the words new enough in his mouth that he had to place them one by one. For the text, for letting optics talk louder than I did. I know, I said. Bring me the truth when it's ready. I'll try, he said. Try is a verb, I said. It counts. He stood and reached for his jacket, the rain-slick fabric cold in his hands. Do you want me to walk you to bed? He asked like he was 7 again and the hallway had monsters. I want you to walk home in the rain and think, I said. Don't call Olivia from the lobby. Let the storm get to you first. He nodded like a man accepting a sentence he had written for himself. At the door, he turned back, kissed my forehead the way I once taught him to, when he was taller than me and needed new ways to be my child. I love you, Mom. I love you more than your comments, I said, and that made him laugh for real. He left and the hall swallowed his steps. I locked the door because living alone has taught me this. Love can knock, wisdom works the deadbolt. I washed the mug and left it upside down on the rack like a small dome. The rain softened to a steady hush. I stood in the kitchen, a woman in a city that had been unkind and generous in equal measure, and listened to the quiet settle into the corners. Somewhere, music shouted across a room. Somewhere else, a florist arranged peonies for people who had paid nothing but attention. In my apartment, a mother and her boundaries ate the same meal. Certainty. Before I went to bed, I wrote one line in the notebook, neat as a line on a ruler. If he learns to stand in the rain without asking the sky for permission, he will be fine. Then I turned off the lamp. The dark came in like a blanket, and the house, faithful as always, held. Morning arrived with the smell the city wears after rain, like metal cooled and bread warmed. I brewed coffee and stood at the window while the lake practiced being a mirror again. The apartment felt newly washed, as if the storm had come inside and tidied the corners courage always forgets. At 9, there was the gentlest knock, 3 notes, spaced like someone who respects thresholds. Eleanor. She slipped in with a brown paper bag and set it on the counter as if it were a hymn. Blueberry muffins, she said. From the place that knows not to skimp on berries. You always bring the kind that stain your fingers, I said. Proof you ate something worth remembering, she answered, and we smiled at the old ritual of 2 women pretending pastry counts as medicine. We ate without hurry. She watched the way I lifted my cup, noted the set of my shoulders. Eleanor measures you the way a nurse measures vitals, not to scold, to steady. How's your back? She asked. Like an old choir, still sings but needs a chair between songs. And your heart? Also a choir, I said. Last night it learned a minor key it didn't know it could sing. She nodded, pleased by the truth and not the poetry. Good. We let the silence take a seat. Outside, a bus sighed at the corner. Somewhere, a neighbor dragged a chair across the floor with the heavy love-only furniture gets. I canceled it, I said finally. All of it. I assumed as much when the florist texted me a photo of peonies smiling at a community gala, she said. They looked relieved. So did I said, and then because I didn't have to be brave with her, and also like I'd swallowed a stone. Stones are honest, she said. They sit where you put them. It's people who roll around and bruise you. I laughed, and the room warmed by 1 degree. She sipped her coffee. Tell me what you need from me today. Not a helicopter, I said. A handrail. Good, she said, pleased to be named correctly. Here is my hand. She placed it palm up on the table, a small ceremony. I put mine on top. It's remarkable how much weight 2 hands can carry when they agree which way is forward. I want to set things so that the next storm doesn't require me to be young, I said. I want to protect what I have left without building a bunker. Elinor's eyes softened into the kind of alert that gets things done. I know a lawyer who treats women like math. No condescension, all clarity. You'll like him because he speaks in verbs. Verbs are my people, I said. She smiled. We'll talk trusts, beneficiary designations, powers of attorney, not because you're in danger, but because boundaries deserve paperwork. Paperwork is a door with your name on the key, I said, and she gave me a little nod, the happy nod of a teacher whose student has brought a sentence back from last year and kept it alive. We cleaned the crumbs as if gathering small blessings, then she drove us downtown in a sedan that minded its manners. The city wore its weekday face, men in suits looking late and important, women in flats carrying a whole building's worth of hope in a tote. We passed the river that had been meant to carry our party. It merely carried itself. The office sat in an old brick building that smelled like restored trust. A brass directory listed names that had survived decades without turning into euphemisms. We took an elevator with a mirror that returned our faces without judgment. On the 5th floor, a door announced Marcus Avery-esque. Ironic, to sit across from another Marcus and expect less trouble. He met us in a blue shirt that remembered the iron and eyes that remembered why he'd gone to law school. "M.S. Johnson," he said, shaking my hand in a way that signaled he'd shake it again when we were done. "Elinor tells me you want guardrails, not a cage." "Correct," I said. "I want my life to be protected from impulse and optics, including my own." He smiled at that. "We can do simple and strong." He slid a pad toward me and drew rectangles the way teachers do when a subject deserves a map. "At your age and circumstances, I suggest a revocable living trust. You transfer title to the house, rename the accounts into the trust, and you remain the trustee while you're healthy. You keep control. When you're gone, or if you can't act, the successor trustee steps in." He tapped the second box. "You choose the successor." "Not my son," I said before the sentence finished climbing out of him. It surprised us all, especially me, how quickly it arrived. Marcus Avery didn't blink. "You can choose anyone you trust not to conflate love with access." "Say that on a billboard," I murmured. Elinor's mouth tilted. "He does this for a living." He continued, gentle. "We'll also do a will that pours anything stray into the trust, a durable power of attorney for finances, and a healthcare directive with HIPAA authorization. That way, if someone tries to help you by calling your bank, the bank can say, with confidence and documentation, no." He said it kindly, but the subtext sat at the table. Olivia with her careful sentences, the suggestion that, for your own good, should unlock the vault. I thought of my accounts, modest but mine, and felt something in my chest with the relief of a latch bolting smoothly. "And the beneficiaries?" he asked. "My daughter Maya," I said without drama. "She visits because she visits, not because she counts. For the grandchildren to come, one day an education fund. For my son, something that matches our relationship as it is, not as I wish it to be." It wasn't punishment, it was accuracy. "Conditions?" he asked. "Not hoops," I said. "Just manners. I don't want money to teach anyone the wrong lesson about how love works. If he keeps his mother out of the lounge, he can keep himself out of the trust." Marcus Avery's pen paused. He looked up, met my eyes with something like respect. "Clear is kind," he said, and wrote. For an hour we walked the field together, titles, deeds, account numbers, beneficiary forms. He translated the Latin into what a woman can carry in her purse, names, signatures, dates. When we reached the page about personal property, the small universe of things no one else would know how to value, he looked at my hands. "Make a letter, M.S. Johnson," he said. "Tell the story of your things, who gets Calvin's tool belt, who gets the recipe cards with butter on the corners. The law can divide a bank account. It cannot divide memory. You are the only one who can title that. My throat went bright with tears. It wasn't sorrow. It was gratitude for someone who sees the parts of you the courthouse ignores. I'll write it, I said. We stood. There was more paper to come, the drafts, the signatures, the witnesses, but for now we had drawn the shape of a fence that did not look like a prison. I shook his hand and he held mine a half-second longer than business required. You're doing the right kind of hard, he said. Most people don't learn how until too late. We rode the elevator like women who had found the button for steady. On the street, the sun tried on its noon suit and decided it fit. Elinor tucked her arm through mine. Lunch? Greasy and honest, I said. We found a diner that wore its history in the coffee stains on its menu. We ordered eggs and hash browns that had been practicing since 1978. Elinor sprinkled pepper like confetti. He's good, she said. He speaks in verbs, I replied. I felt safer by page 3. You'll feel even safer when the titles change and the bank cards come with new names on them, she said. One day soon, if someone calls pretending concern, the bank will pretend right back and hang up. I buttered toast, thought of Olivia's apology in pastel, the way certain people turn care into a crowbar. I don't want to become hard, I said. Just locked where I should be locked. Good locks make soft rooms possible, she said. And remember, a trust isn't a moat. It's a map. Here's how to love me when I can't tell you anymore. We ate in companionable silence. At the next table, a little boy traced the pattern of the formica with his finger and announced, "It looks like a river." His mother nodded with that tired love that still remembers wonder. I thought of my own boy, standing in the rain last night trying to push momentum back with his palms. I wished him a map. Back at my apartment, Elinor followed me in and did the small, unasked-for things that make life lighter. Folded the dish towel the way my mother had, refilled the sugar jar, put the pepper shaker where I always forget to. Text me when Marcus calls, she said at the door. If he calls, I said. He will, she said. People who have been loved learn to feel the wall when they hit it. They come back for a door. After she left, the rooms rearranged themselves into quiet. I took out a legal pad and started the letter Marcus Avery had asked for, the one where memory gets titles. To my children, I wrote, if this letter has found you, it means I've gone where your father went first. Don't argue in my kitchen. Eat something before you cry. Calvin's tool belt is for Marcus only if he promises to fix what people can't see is broken. Maya gets the recipe box because she understands that food is a religion that forgives. The blue quilt stays on the couch. It belongs to everyone who needs a nap. The mug that says world's okayest cook goes to the grandchild who asks the best questions. I wrote until the light changed. Then I stood and moved through the apartment touching what I had named, chair, book, pan, picture. Naming is a blessing that doesn't require a church. Evening took the windows gently. I made tea and sat with the cup warming my palms. The phone vibrated against the table, Marcus. I let it dance 3 times before I answered. Mom. His voice was smaller, like a room after a party. I read the emails. Olivia's furious. I'm less angry. Mostly I'm tired of being a person I don't recognize when there's a camera pointed at me. I made muffins, I said, which is how mothers say come over without asking pride to change its clothes. He laughed. Real sound? I can come in an hour. Good, I said. We'll sit like humans. Mom, I'm here. I don't know how to make this up to you, he said. I can start with sorry. It's not a press release. It's from my actual mouth. I'm sorry. Thank you, I said and let it land. We'll build from there. After the call, I wrote one more sentence in the notebook, slow and neat. A handrail is what keeps you from falling when you choose the stairs over the elevator. I underlined choose. The elevator is quick. It is also how you miss the view. When the knock came later, it was the soft one, my son's, learning to be a man again in the presence of a woman who had decided not to disappear. I opened the door and there he was, washed by daylight instead of optics. Behind him, the hall smelled faintly of rain even though the sky had cleared. That's the thing about storms, they leave their lesson on the air just long enough for you to breathe it in. Marcus arrived with his shoulders dropped the way men wear them when they've run out of posture. He kicked off his shoes without being asked, a ritual older than his sneakers, and took his place at the table. I tore 2 muffins in half so the blueberries would stain our fingers and handed him a napkin he wouldn't use. I'm sorry, he said again, like a person practicing a new instrument in front of someone who loves them enough to listen. No camera this time. No pitch deck. Just sorry. Good, I said. Let's feed it. We ate the muffins slow. Butter softened into the warm pockets and the kitchen breathed in time with us. There is a rhythm to remorse when it's real. It makes its own silence. He told me about the calls and the meetings, about sponsors whose voices were all smile and arithmetic. They said the word alignment so many times I started hearing it as a threat, he admitted, rubbing the bridge of his nose with the side of his thumb the way Calvin used to when a job bid went sideways. I kept thinking of you standing in this kitchen, the light over the sink, the way you say my name when I've lost it. I'm glad you thought about a light, I said. It doesn't make you less bright to stand under one you didn't have to plug in. He leaned back, palms flat on the table like he was ready to push himself up but had chosen not to. I want to fix it, he said. I don't know how. Sometimes fixing a thing starts with stopping the thing, I said. Today you stopped telling yourself a story that made me smaller. He nodded, and his mouth made the shape of a smile that hadn't reached his eyes yet when the doorbell rang. Twice, quick, purposeful. The timing of someone who trusts locks but not permission. Olivia stepped in when I opened the door, a gust of eucalyptus following her. A ring light's echo in her pupils even in daylight. She had the face people practice for reconciliation content, earnest, damp around the edges. MS. Loretta, she said, then pivoted toward Marcus with relief disguised as tenderness. Thank God, you left without please, we need to talk. Kara's in full spiral and the brand wants a revised statement. We're eating, I said. You can join us or you can wait. She glanced at the muffins like they were artifacts in a museum devoted to choices she did not make, then tugged at the cuff of Marcus's sleeve. We should go, she said. Now. Marcus didn't rise. He looked at her hand like it belonged to a kindly stranger who'd picked up something of his and forgotten to give it back. Sit a minute, he said. Olivia's eyes flicked around my kitchen, tile, fridge, towel, as if the room itself might be hiding an argument. She perched on the edge of a chair, a person in an audition waiting for the cue that confirms she is wanted. I've been doing damage control all morning, she began, tapping her phone face down as if it were a microphone with stage fright. I posted twice. People are still clipping and twisting. We need to keep the wedding narrative clean or we risk losing. My mother, Marcus said softly, and the word sat between us like a lit candle. We risk losing my mother. Olivia blinked the way people do when the obvious shows up and asks for a glass of water. That isn't fair, she said. I invited her. I want her there. After she canceled the contracts, I said. After your apology. After the brand sent you a schedule that didn't include my name. That schedule was a draft, she said quickly, relief brightening her face at finding a word she could control. We were going to make space. Make space is a nice way to say we forgot you until optics required you, I said. She reached for sincerity like a scarf and wrapped it around her sentence. I didn't forget you. I compartmentalized. I was trying to protect the frame. You keep talking about frames, I said. Frames don't protect the picture. They announce it. What you're protecting is a brand that's allergic to its own roots. Why are you making this about where I'm from? She snapped, the veneer cracking. I built my platform. I negotiated every contract. Nobody gave me. Nobody is taking that from you, Marcus interjected, hands lifted as if the air itself needed gentling. We're not talking about your hustle, Liv. We're talking about the cost. Olivia looked from him to me and back like a traveler who suddenly reads all the signs in a language she doesn't speak. The cost is losing months of work, she said, counting on her fingers. The venue hold, the floral plan, the partnerships lining up. The cost, I said, was my seat. She stared, then laughed, not cruelly, more like a person who has tripped and is waiting for the ground to be polite about it. You can sit wherever you want. Head table. On the terrace, we can set a special corner. Stop setting me aside with nice words, I said. Corners are still corners. The door opened again, Maya, hair in a scarf, tote bag bumping her knee, an expression that had been sharpened all day by fifth graders who confuse volume with influence. I brought the pictures, she said without preamble and slid a shoebox onto the table. Olivia flinched as if we'd set down a mirror. What is this? Olivia asked. Defensiveness doing the math it always does. How much of me is in danger here? Evidence, Maya said gently, because she's a teacher and knows how to make hard things less afraid. She lifted a stack of photos and spread them like a deck of truth. Marcus at 8, gap-toothed, holding a science fair ribbon while my hand steadied the poster board. Maya with a crooked paper crown, frosting on her chin, my apron dusted with flour. A cramped apartment living room with a sagging couch that held 3 sleeping bodies after a double shift, my head lolling upright, a book closed on my chest. The edges were soft from being handled. The colors had faded in the places we had loved them. Look, Maya said, sliding one toward Olivia, me in the front row of a school play, clapping like a woman who believed applause could hold up a set. Olivia scanned it, lips thin. I'm sure you were there, she said. I never said you weren't there. Maya held up another, a graduation in a gym with bad acoustics and better hopes, my hands framing Marcus's face so he had to look at me when I said I was proud. Being there isn't optics, Maya said. It's a habit. That's what we are asking you not to edit. Olivia's eyes found Marcus. Are you really going to sit here while they paint me as some kind of? Nobody is painting you, he said. We are asking you to stop trying to paint over us. Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, the way a new swimmer learns where the air is. I wanted the night to be beautiful, she said, and for the first time all morning the sentence sounded like it came from a human mouth. I wanted to be proud of what we made. And you thought the mess would make it less beautiful, I said. But mess is where the pride comes from. Ask my hands. Your hands, she repeated. I showed her the scars, grease burns tiny as constellations, a chicken wire nick, the pale box cutter line from the high school supply room. These are the frames, I said. They held the picture before there was a photographer. Olivia looked down at her own hands, manicured and capable. I watched something tilt inside her, a slow, reluctant shift like a mirror being angled toward a different window. The phone on the table buzzed. She didn't reach for it. People were cruel to me online, she said, almost to herself. They said I was ashamed of where he came from. She swallowed, eyes bright in a way that wasn't staged. I'm not ashamed. I'm afraid of being small again, of being ignored, of losing the thing I built because I didn't control every angle. There it was, the real confession, the kind that doesn't come with pastel hearts. Marcus moved first the way love does when fear finally admits its true name. Then don't build a life that requires control to keep standing, he said. Build one that stands because it belongs to us. She looked at him, at the shoebox, at me. I don't know how, she whispered. Start by saying you were wrong, Maya said, gentler than I could have been. Not the soft kind, the kind that lands. Olivia inhaled, exhaled, found the floor with her eyes. I was wrong, she said, voice low but clear. About the lounge, about the frame, about the apology I wrote to my followers instead of to the person I hurt. She turned to me. MS, Loretta, I am sorry. Not because of sponsors, because of your seat, because I treated your presence like a variable when it should have been the constant. The kitchen listened. The house, which has seen lies dressed as gifts and truths dressed as silence, seemed to lean in. I nodded once, letting the apology travel the distance it needed to, without rushing to catch it. Thank you, I said. Now do the next part. What's the next part? She asked, a student who had finally found the right classroom. Return what you took, I said. Not the money, the room, the right to be a mother without an angle. She nodded. Okay, she said. Okay. She picked up her phone, turned it over, and slid it into her bag as if it were a tool she had finished using for the day. She looked at Marcus. We'll call Kara. We'll tell her the head table is a family table. No content corners. If sponsors want out because mothers sit in light, then maybe they weren't our sponsors. The sentence surprised her. I watched it surprise her and fit anyway. Marcus reached for her hand, not the tug of earlier, but a touch that asked permission to stay. She let him. There's more, he said. We need to talk about money. About Mom not being the underwriter of our courage or our cowardice. We'll pay back what she put down over time if we have to. We'll hold our own contracts. Olivia nodded. Yes. Then she turned to me again. Tonight, if it's not too late, will you come to dinner? I looked at the shoebox, the muffins, my notebook under the sugar jar. I thought of Alina's hand on the table, palm up, and the lawyer's rectangles that made a fence, not a prison. I thought of rain on my windows and the way my name looked on a contract that now meant something more than payment. I'll come, I said, and watched Marcus's shoulders sag with relief, watched Olivia's eyes fill with a fearful kind of gratitude. And if I see a content corner, I'll send you home and finish the meal with whoever's left. Olivia almost laughed, then sobered. Fair. Maya began repacking the photos, tucking the edges carefully like she was putting babies to bed. She left one out, the graduation one, and slid it under the magnet on the fridge beside the peony email. Leave that up, she said. Let the kitchen decide the theme. We stood, the room shifted back into its usual shape. Olivia reached for a muffin half she hadn't earned and looked at me before taking it. May I? Eat, I said. You'll need sugar. At the door, she hesitated. I don't think I can fix the internet, she said, like someone confessing she cannot pick up a building. You can't, I agreed. Fix your house. Marcus squeezed my shoulder with the same hand that used to squeeze my finger when we crossed streets. They left together, not quite in step, but willing to try. The hallway swallowed them. A neighbor's TV laughed without context. Maya lingered, eyes on me. You okay? I am, corrected, I said, not conquered. She grinned. That's going on a mug. When she'd gone, I washed the cups and set them upside down to dry, two small domes gleaming under the sink light. The shoebox sat on the table, lid ajar, the past breathing comfortably. I slid my notebook out and wrote, "Repentance is a door, restitution is the hinge." Then I drew a small square under the sentence, a table, and wrote 4 names around it. I did not add sponsors. I did not add optics. I did not add content. I added grace in the center, not because I can count on it, but because I can set a place for it and hope it comes hungry. The afternoon thinned into that hour when light gets honest. I wiped the table, slid the shoebox back under the chair, and waited for the house to tell me what it needed. My phone stayed where I'd left it, face down under the sugar jar like a child in timeout who has finally quieted. When it buzzed, it did so with restraint, as if it had learned the rules. First came a text from Marcus, called Kara, family table, no content zones, we're redoing the run of show, coming by later with a plan. Then a second from an unknown number that introduced itself with confidence. Hi Loretta, I'm from Pulse magazine. We'd love your voice on the viral conversation, motherhood, class, modern weddings. Could we get an exclusive? They attached a little bouquet of emojis because even a pitch wears perfume now. I deleted the message without answering. Some people confuse a platform with a porch. Porches are for neighbors and lemonade. Platforms are for echoes. I have enough of those inside my own head. I brewed tea and pulled out my notebook. Repentance is a door. Restitution is the hinge. Below it, I wrote the thing I knew would have to be real or all of this would curdle. Money back is manners, but respect is the currency I spend. The doorbell rung once short. Meyer again, this time carrying a stack of handouts. Unit plans, she said, dropping them like a deck of maps. Thought I'd grade here so you can judge the future with me. Will be kind, I said, pouring her tea. We worked in quiet, the kind that feels like friendship wearing slippers. Every so often she'd read a sentence aloud from a 5th grader who had just discovered metaphor and wanted the world to know. Listen, the sun was a lemon god squeezed into the sky. We grinned, we put a small check next to the line as if it were a seed we hoped would remember where we planted it. The phone buzzed again. This time Olivia, sponsors balking. One pulled out. We told them the head table is not negotiable. We'll make it work. See you soon. I read it twice. The way you read directions on medicine, hopeful, cautious, braced for side effects. Losing sponsors, Meyer asked, reading my face. One already, maybe more. She shrugged. Cheap gods are easy to quit. Real ones cost you. I thought of Calvin at the kitchen table with his ledger, pencil shaved down to stubborn. He used to say, if you pay once for the right thing, you pay less forever. We hadn't always been able to afford that truth. Today, I could. At 6, the hallway filled with familiar footsteps. Marcus and Olivia entered carrying paper bags that smelled like compromise done right. Roasted chicken, green beans slicked with garlic, biscuits wrapped in a towel so they would stay humble. Olivia's makeup was normal again, which is to say she had a face and not a mask. She set the bags on the counter like offerings and exhaled. We're doing it our way, she said. Probably with fewer chairs. How many fewer? Meyer asked. At least 2 sponsors, Olivia said. The biggest one said their brand values didn't include uncontrolled emotional variables at premium events. She air-quoted the phrase, mouth twisting. I told them our brand values do, mother, father, family, forgiveness. They said good luck. She cracked a small smile. I said thanks, we'll need less of it if we have more of ourselves. Then I hung up and puked. Marcus grinned despite the day. She really did. In the venue parking lot. Good, I said. First honest purge of your career. We set the table together, not fancy, plates that have survived drops and moves, napkins that didn't match because life doesn't. Olivia reached for the good glasses and then stopped. The regular ones are fine, she said, and I decided then that if she stuck with my boy, we might someday be friends. Before we ate, Marcus pulled a folded paper from his pocket and flattened it on the table with ceremony. A budget, he said. With real numbers, we'll pay back what you put down for deposits and prep. It'll take 2 months if everything stays steady. 4 if it doesn't. We'll cut the extras. We'll do flowers from Dylan's seconds and a band from church if Robin's crew has room. No lighting rigs, just people who know how to stand near each other. I read the grid, take-home pay. Rent, Olivia's freelance checks, what they could cut, 3 subscriptions, a second car they didn't need, shirts that only looked good on strangers. It was humble and exact. It looked like a start. Keep your health insurance intact, I said, tapping the line. We are not paying for bravery with bodies. We will, he promised. We also canceled the content team. If a memory is good, we'll let it be imperfect. Olivia nodded. I'll ask 2 friends to take photos if they feel like it. Not for the feed, for a drawer. Her mouth softened around the last word. Drawers are where poor people keep their history, Shoeboxes, Ziplocs, the label important written in a hurry. It made me like her more that she knew that. We ate standing at first, because hunger sometimes outruns etiquette, then sat once our hands had remembered something besides want. The chicken tasted like we had bought forgiveness at the market. The biscuits pulled apart like a truce. Halfway through the meal, my phone buzzed again, a name I didn't expect. Dylan Flowers. Brought extra peonies to the gala, still got a bucket of stubborns that won't quit. Can I drop a handful by? No charge. Consider it an apology from beauty for being so easily weaponized. I looked at Maya and laughed. Let him, she said. The kitchen wants perfume. 20 minutes later, Dylan knocked, hair wet from sprinting rain rounds between deliveries. He handed me a jam jar full of peonies that had refused to give up their bloom just because a party did. They keep trying to open, he said, as if the flowers were toddlers and he was both parent and fan. He nodded at Marcus and Olivia, clocked the vibe, and grinned. Good, this room got the right light. After he left, we put the flowers in the center of the table and did not take a picture. We just breathed them in. When dishes were stacked and promises made, Oliva pulled out her phone one more time, but not to post. She opened notes and held the screen out to me. Draft, she said. Before I send it, I want to read it out loud. She stood there in my kitchen and recited an apology that didn't look pretty on paper, but sounded true in a mouth. I mistook control for care. I edited a family to fit a frame I thought would keep us safe. In doing so, I forgot the point of a wedding, to seat the people who built you at the table where you promise not to forget them. I'm sorry, to my mother-in-law first, to my family next, and to anyone who watched me choose image over intimacy. We're recalibrating. If that costs us partnerships, we'll be rich in other currencies. When she finished, she looked ready to faint or run. Too much? She asked. It's the right size, I said. Enough to fit the truth, not enough to fit the internet. She smiled, small but real. I'll post later, after we've called everyone who needs to hear it directly. Maya rinsed plates and stacked them 2 by 2. Look at us, she said. A little church, no pews, plenty of sacrament. Marcus took the trash out and returned smelling like rain again. He leaned against the counter where Calvin used to and said, There's a fallout coming, you ready? I was born in fallout, I said. What I wasn't born with was a folder and a lockbox. I have those now. I patted the counter where my notebook lay, closed, not hiding. And I have you practicing sorry like scales. He winced, good-natured. I'll keep practicing. We moved to the living room with our tea, the lamp setting a circle of light the size of 4 people who intended to sit and mean it. The TV stayed off. The only sound was the building breathing and the tiny tick of the peony jar cooling. What about the rehearsal dinner? Olivia asked after a moment. Tonight? You mean the one that rehearsed a life I couldn't enter? I said. We're holding a different rehearsal. She nodded, accepting the correction. Then consider this practice, she said, and lifted her mug as if toasting an audience of one. To the mother who built our table. Speak to the room you sit in, Maya said, lifting hers, not the one you want people to think you have. Marcus raised his. To building a life we can stand in when the camera's off. I lifted mine last. To clean hands, I said, because they cost you something. We drank. Outside, sirens did their usual song, unbothered by toasts. The city continued like a river does, indifferent, necessary there. Inside, we cleaned the counters with warm water and old cloths. Olivia offered to stay and help with floors. I sent her home to sleep and mean it. At the door, she hesitated the way people do when they suddenly remember they have parents. MS. Loretta, she said, if I ruin this again, will you tell me before you cancel the world? I won't cancel the world, I said. Only my part in it, and I will tell you first. Fair, she whispered. Then, unexpected, she leaned in, not for content, not for optics, but for a hug that wasn't sure of itself. I let her. You can trust a hug that has to think twice. When they'd gone, Maya flopped on the couch like she'd earned gravity. Tomorrow? She asked. Lawyer, I said. Trust, paper that makes today's courage available later. She smiled at the ceiling. I like it when verbs get jobs. We sat a while, letting the day settle. The peonies opened a fraction more, reckless, tender. I thought of the boy who had stood in my kitchen last night, rain on his lashes, and the man who had made a budget at my table this evening. I thought of the girl who had learned to put her phone away before she apologized. I thought of Calvin, who would have belly laughed at the idea of a content corner, and then dragged the table into the street so neighbors could eat too. When Maya left, she took the recycling down, because daughters are the kind of people who carry what would otherwise get in your way. Alone, I washed the last 2 cups and set them on the rack, 2 domes of ordinary, catching light. Before bed, I opened the notebook and wrote, Integrity is the only sponsor that doesn't ask for a logo. Under it, I added another line for the morning's work, call Marcus Avery. Sign what needs signing, pack a biscuit for a leaner. I closed the cover and slid it under the pepper shaker. Some truths need spice. I turned out the light. The apartment exhaled. In the quiet, I heard a small sound from the kitchen, the soft push of petals finding room. I smiled into the dark. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, and whatever else storms can't help but blow in. Tonight I had a table, a plan, and the knowledge that clean hands, though costly, are easier to hold. Morning found the peonies whiter, reckless little lungs taking more of the room. I wrapped a biscuit in wax paper, slid it into my purse beside the legal pad, and called a car. The sky had that good Chicago blue that makes brick look honest. I texted Myra heart she didn't need and Marcus a thumbs up he did, then headed downtown to meet the man with the rectangles. Eleanor was already in the lobby, hair neat, eyes bright, a coat folded over her arm the way women who have been through weather carry things, prepared, unbothered. "You brought me a sermon," she said when I handed her the warm bundle. "Only one biscuit per parishioner," I said. She smiled and linked her arm through mine. The elevator rose like an idea that had finally found its sentence. In Marcus Avery's office, the documents waited in a tidy stack, paper clipped in the solemn way good paper requests. He greeted us with the calm of a man who has seen too much panic to add any of his own. "MS. Johnson," he said, "we've translated your intentions into English." "Good," I said. "My heart doesn't speak Latin anymore." We sat. He talked us through, page by page, clause by clause, the way a patient teacher points to a map and names rivers you already know but need to see labeled to trust them. "Revocable living trust," he read. "You are trustee while capacitated. On incapacity or death, successor trustee steps in. We've named Eleanor as first successor, if she'll accept, given her history of staying handrail, not helicopter." Eleanor nodded once. "I accept," she said quietly, the way a person accepts a child's hand crossing a street. "Pour over will," he continued, tapping the next document. "Anything outside the trust at death pours into it. Durable power of attorney, finances, HIPAA and healthcare directives here." He slid a pen across the desk. "These are the verbs." I signed where he pointed, the way you write your name on a door that was always yours but needed the label so others would stop knocking like they owned it. Loretta M. Johnson, over and over, the loop steadying, my hand remembering how to be the first witness to my life. We paused at the distribution section, the part of a life that asks you to imagine absence as logistics. Marcus Avery looked up. "Final confirmation, house to trust, primary accounts red-idled, beneficiary designations aligned. Upon death, Maya receives the residuary less the specific bequests, a defined education fund for future grandchildren. Marcus receives a fixed legacy with a clause." He smoothed the page. "This language here, contingent upon maintaining a relationship of respect, free of financial coercion. It's unusual, but enforceable if the trustee documents patterns." "Patterns we can notarize with memory," Eleanor murmured. I took a breath. "He won't be punished for being young or for learning slowly," I said. "He will be corrected for selling dignity at a discount. We've kept it kind and clear," Marcus Avery said, "and flexible. People change. Paper should allow their better angels room to land." We signed. A witness came in, signed. Another signed. A notary stamped a gold seal that made the page blink like a medal. It felt less like closing a door than installing a lock I'd asked for. Next came the retitling forms, the bank accounts, the deed. Marcus Avery called his paralegal in to schedule the county recording for the house. "In a few weeks, your mailbox will receive proof your decisions made the journey to the public record," he said. "Until then, this binder is your map." He slid a navy binder across the desk. It had my name embossed in small letters near the spine, humble as a signature on a casserole dish. Inside, tabs, trust, will, POA, healthcare, titles, contacts, instructions. In the front pocket, a letter on heavy paper. To my children, the one I drafted now typed, my grease stains replaced by clean margins but the butter at the corners still implied. "Bring it home," Eleanor said, patting the cover as if it were a cat that might leap. "Put it where you keep the sugar. Paper belongs where life happens." I handed Marcus Avery the biscuit. "I pay my lawyers in breakfast theology," I said. He laughed. "This will do." Then, more serious, "MS. Johnson, you've made something that will help your family do the right kind of hard when you can't coach. That's the best gift I see here." When we left, the city felt legible, as if street signs had grown a little bolder during the hour we were upstairs. We walked to the bank for the account paperwork, sat with a young woman in a blazer who read the trust name carefully and didn't flinch at the word revocable. She stamped, printed, handed me a thicker wallet. "Here are your new cards," she said. "Same money, safer doors." "Thank you," I said, and meant it like a blessing. On the sidewalk, the wind lifted the edge of my scarf. Elinor tucked it down with the familiarity of someone who has done this for years. "Lunch?" she asked. "Later," I said. "I want to go home and see how paper looks in my kitchen." At my apartment, the peonies had sprawled into joy. I set the binder on the table, slid the letter to my children into the front, and put 2 sticky notes where the money lives so even my future forgetful self wouldn't have to wander. I sent Myra a photo of the binder exactly where Elinor had suggested, next to the sugar jar. Filed under sweet and serious, I texted. She replied, "You're ridiculous. I love you." Marcus's text came in quick behind. "Band says they can do Saturday. Church rate." Dylan's sending buckets of stubborns. "We'll have flowers like a protest." Olivia posted, "Sponsors fell, friends stayed." He added a photo of 2 text threads, one with a brand that said regretfully, and another with a cousin who wrote, "Whatever y'all need, we got." That is a phrase money cannot buy, Olivia called, her voice smaller and more human. "We told Kara to break the head table into one long table," she said. "No VIP zones, a family table with chairs that squeak." "Chairs that squeak remind people they are alive," I said. "Good choice." "And MS, Loretta, I'm here." "I said your name out loud," she said. "When I called the sponsors, I said I hurt Loretta. It did something to me." "Names will do that," I said. "They put the person back where the brand tried to put the problem." In the afternoon, Maya came by to inspect the binder the way a daughter inspects a new staircase. She flipped through tabs, nodded at the healthcare directive, smoothed the letter that named the mug and the quilt. "This is love," she said, tapping the laminated emergency contact list. "Uglier than roses, better than speeches." We made a pot of beans. While they simmered, she took the blue quilt from the back of the couch and wrapped it around her shoulders like a shawl. "You know," she said, "paper is also a quilt. It holds pieces of you together in the chill." "Then tonight is the binding stitch," I said. By 6, the apartment was wearing its best smell: onion, cumin, forgiveness. Marcus arrived first with crates from Dylan peonies and odds and ends flowers, a riot of color that looked like strangers trying to get along and mostly succeeding. Olivia followed, hair pulled back, face bare, carrying a pan of cornbread she confessed she'd made from a box and then improved with love and milk instead of water. "I didn't post it," she said, shyly proud. "I just baked it." We set a long table the old-fashioned way, 2 tables pushed together. A leaf that had hidden in the closet, mismatched chairs borrowed from neighbors who didn't ask what for because we have lived a long time next to each other's need. Robin and 2 bandmates lugged in a stand-up bass and a trumpet, promised to keep it soft and not make the silverware feel threatened. "We'll play like a porch," Robin said, and set her keys down where Calvin used to. Neighbors brought what they had. A bowl of collards, a pie that leaned, a jug of lemonade, sweating through paper cups. Someone lit candles that had been waiting to be useful. Someone else wiped the table with a dish towel that had seen better days and then decided these were they. When Elinor knocked, the room made a little space around her the way people do for someone who once handed them a map. She took a seat near the middle, not head, not corner, and folded her hands as if she were about to grade us and decided instead to clap. There was no seating chart. People asked, "Where should I?" And I said, "Next to someone you love," and that worked. I took my place among them, not as a signature or a sponsor, but as a woman whose name belonged to the room. Before we ate, Marcus stood, cleared his throat, looked at me, looked at Olivia. "I owe the room a sentence," he said. "I let fear dress itself as excellence. It looked good. It was cowardice. I'm sorry." He swallowed. "I want a life that doesn't require lighting rigs to cast the right shadow." Olivia took his hand, squeezed, and added her part without turning it into a duet. "I mistook control for care," she said, voice steady. "It made me edit a mother. I won't do that again." She looked at me, not the room. "I'm sorry, MS Loretta. I'll learn your name the way this family says grace, every time and first." It is not easy to accept apologies when your pride is still suspicious, but somewhere in my chest a valve opened. I let the words in, not to wash me clean, but to water the ground for what should grow next. "Eat," I said. "Then keep being people who can say sorry and mean it." We ate. Robin played a hymn that didn't say God out loud and still managed to. The trumpet learned to whisper. Someone laughed the laugh that reminds a room where the joy lives. We passed bowls and stories, Calvin's ladder accident that became legend, Maya's student who named the son a lemon, Olivia's grandmother's trick for getting cornbread out of a pan without losing her religion. Halfway through the meal, I slipped to the bedroom, pulled the small box from the closet, and brought it to the table. "I wrote a letter," I said, tapping the navy binder beside the sugar. "It tells you where the mug and quilt go when I have to leave you to your own cooking. but I want to give these while I can still see your faces when you protest. I handed Marcus his father's tool belt, the leather softened into kindness by years of honest work. He tried to refuse. It is a family reflex. I shook my head. On one condition, I said, use it to fix what people can't see is broken. He nodded, swallowing around a lump big enough to chafe. I gave Maya the recipe box, grease halos still marking the cards like saints. She lifted a card and smiled. Butter, butter, apology, butter, she read. The Johnson method. Effective, I said. Finally, I held up the mug that calls me the world's okayest cook. This goes to the first grandchild who asks the best questions, I announced, and the table laughed the kind of laugh that plants hope without embarrassing it. We ate more. We cleaned as we went. People looked toward their phones and then didn't. When the band took a break, we pushed the chairs back and made a small mosh pit of aunties and knees, a dance that looked like advice and sounded like spoons tapping a glass. A neighbor's toddler wrapped both arms around my shin and declared me my friend. There are titles better than donor. Later, after plates were stacked and the final song landed like a blessing on a warm shoulder, the room thinned to just us again. Olivia wiped the table with a dishcloth like it mattered. Marcus took out the trash and returned smelling like alley and weather and a man trying. Alina kissed my cheek and said, you look papered in all the best ways. Robin tucked her bass under her arm and promised Saturday would feel like this, only louder, the good kind of loud. When the door shut behind the last guest, the apartment breathed. The peonies leaned, spent and gorgeous. I poured tea I didn't need just to have something warm to hold. Marcus pulled a chair next to mine and put his head on my shoulder the way he did when he was 8 and sure sleep couldn't find him unless he was touching me. Mom, he said into my sleeve, you made a door today. I made a door and a rule for the key, I said. He nodded against my arm. I can live inside that. Olivia stood in the kitchen doorway, hands empty, face raw the way faces are when you've cried and then learned something with the crying. I'll keep the door open, she said, even when the camera is on. Especially then, I said. They left to their own small apartment and the work of being people without an audience. I put the binder back by the sugar, the way you put a family book on a shelf you can reach in the dark. I wrote one line in my notebook before bed. Paper is how love keeps its promise when memory gets tired. Then I turned out the light. In the quiet, I could hear the petals give in and the house agree to hold us all another night. Outside, the lake remembered itself. Inside, I was not a sponsor or a story or a lesson plan. I was a woman with a pen, a table, and a trust, doors made of paper that opened without squeaking when my name turned the key. On Saturday, the city put on its best ordinary. Pigeons negotiated rooflines. A bus driver waved at a kid he did not know. The lake kept the sky's secrets. Inside riverside lofts, the chandeliers looked less like stars and more like what they were, glass that had learned to glow. We arrived with a rhythm that belonged to our block, neighbors carrying bowls, cousins carrying jokes, Robin carrying a melody like a lantern. There was no content corner. Kara met us with a smile that had survived a week. Family table is set, she said, pointing to a long stretch of pushed-together wood that squeaked when you pulled a chair. The place cards were handwritten in a neat, hopeful print. Loretta sat between Maya and Alina, which is to say I was flanked by a future and a steadiness. The florist had sent stubborns, peonies that refused to close just because a mood changed. They leaned out of jam jars like something in the room made them brave. Dylan himself showed up in a too-tight suit and greeted the flowers as if they were old teammates. Go on, he told them, patting a petal. Do your job. Marcus's tie didn't match his pocket square, which is how I knew he was nervous in an honest way. Olivia wore a dress the color of milk with a hem that didn't require a careful step. Her hair was her own. When she saw me, she did not reach for her phone. She reached for my hands. MS. Loretta, she said, and even the MS. Felt like it had changed its shoes, less performance, more respect. You look, she stopped and tried again. I'm glad you're here. Me. Too, I said, and meant both halves. The ceremony took place under no arch in particular. Light came through big windows and decided being simple was noble. Marcus and Olivia said the words people have always said, with the tremble people have always had. There were no sparklers, no smoke machines. There was Maya clearing her throat before reading a poem and Alina standing to say the kind of blessing that blesses the hearer into someone who can keep it. At the reception, Robin played a hymn and then a Motown song and then whatever the room asked for with its feet. The church drummer kept time on borrowed pans. The trumpet learned our names and called them back to us in brass. People danced in the way that makes your doctor happy and your neighbors wave from across the floor. I danced with my son to a song that sounded like rain deciding to be a lullaby. You did right, I whispered into the knot of his tie. Not easy, not pretty every time, but right. He held me tighter, the way boys do when they realize there is a world that wants to make them callous and they have to choose soft on purpose. Later I danced with Olivia, the awkward, laughing, true kind of dancing that forgives the body for trying to be a story. I'm learning, she said, eyes wet for reasons that had no hashtags. I'm slow. Slow is honest, I said. It remembers the steps. We ate bread that had been blessed by butter and patience, beans that had known a long simmer, chicken that fell apart for all the right reasons. People took photos when a moment asked, then put their phones down because some beauty is greedy and needs both hands. Halfway through the night, a sponsor who had left sent a text that said regretfully again. Olivia showed it to me, then deleted it without ceremony. We have better patrons, she said, nodding at the table. Mothers, a band with a porch for a heart, a florist who sends stubborns. Don't forget the credit union, I added, and she laughed. Eleanor ate and did not hover. She clapped at speeches. When the cake wobbled, she steadied it with 2 fingers and a look. I hope to age into that glare, Maya murmured. It could keep bridges from collapsing. As the night settled, someone opened the big doors and the river air wandered in like a late guest. We stood on the terrace not to pose but to breathe. A cousin passed a baby into my arms, and the child went limp in that absolute trust babies offer to the oldest person in the room. I swayed and remembered every small body I'd carried, the sleeping weight that is half responsibility, half privilege. I planted a kiss on a forehead that smelled like a future I would not have to supervise. Look, Maya said, pointing. Across the water, the city shone in its usual arrangement, only softer. It's pretty when it's not trying. So are we, I said. The band's last song was the one Robin promised, the good kind of loud that still lets you talk over it. We talked. We promised to see each other on Tuesdays and meant it. We stacked chairs and ignored the squeaks. The venue staff, who had been bracing for a brand storm, found themselves smiling into a family weather pattern they didn't have to clean up after. At the end, Olivia asked softly, "Can we take one photo for us?" We gathered, not by height or algorithm but by kinship, and someone with paint on his hands and flour on her apron got in front and raised a phone. "Say whatever you want to remember," he said. We didn't say cheese, we said amen. Months unfolded with a pace I recognized, steady, unflashy, beautiful enough to keep. The trust paperwork recorded at the county, the new bank cards came, the binder by the sugar collected exactly 1 coffee ring and a small prayer. I put a sticky note on the front that read, in case of emergency, breathe, eat, call Eleanor, read page 2. Maya started a Saturday reading circle at the elementary school called the Lemon Sun Society. The kids drew their own covers, wrote biographies on the back that began with "I like" and "I am afraid of" and "I want," 3 sentences that teach you how to be human. They asked me to come sometimes. I wore my best earrings and read out loud like words could pay rent. Marcus kept his promise about money and about my seat. We did not track the repayments like proof of love. We tracked them like a habit that made all of us stronger. He invited me to dinner without rehearsal. When meetings threatened to eat his voice, he called and let my kitchen remind it how to sound. On afternoons when his life felt like a test he could fail by breathing wrong, he walked by the lake and let it keep his secrets. Olivia found a different rhythm online. She said no to 3 lucrative partnerships that wanted to rent her family and returned to one that asked for good work without a camera in the kitchen. She posted less and lived more. When she did share, you could see the room she was in rather than the idea of one. In the caption, she apologized to the person she'd used to be without making her a villain. She asked me for recipes and permission to change them. I gave her both, with the condition that butter remained in the roster. Eleanor traveled less and gardened more. Her hands, which had signed checks that changed ends and middles of other people's stories, learned again the small grief of plants. She visited on Sundays. We put a biscuit in a bag for her on her way out. "For the road that doesn't need it," I'd say. She'd lift it like a communion and reply, "For the road that does." Dylan opened a tiny shop called Stubborns & Co. He sold bouquets arranged like neighborhoods, mismatched, generous, unafraid. On my 62nd birthday, he brought a jar with exactly 3 peonies. "Sometimes 3 is plenty," he said. They elbow each other less. Robin's band recorded a live album in a church basement. On the back cover they thanked, "The mother who taught us light is a verb." And me. I learned the small hallelujah of a body that still argues with stairs, but says please and thank you to railings. I learned to nap under the blue quilt without apologizing. I learned the difference between loneliness and quiet. One asks you to be afraid of yourself, the other asks you to listen. I found I liked the sound of my own company when it was not spending all its time apologizing to everyone else's. Some nights I sat by the window and let the block do its soft opera. A couple arguing gently in the key of married, kids playing a game whose rules they made up and will remember for life. A siren reminding everyone that elsewhere hurts, a laugh reminding everyone that here can heal. I closed my eyes and counted my own legacy not in dollars, but in the rooms where my name is a seat and not a slate. The mug that calls me the world's okayest cook lived on the shelf above the stove. Sometimes I took it down and filled it with tea. Sometimes I left it alone, a small joke that had aged into a small truth. Okay is what you call food that fed you and people who stayed. Someday it will belong to a grandchild who asks a question that stops the room, not about brands or budgets, but about love. We'll write the answer on a recipe card and smear it with butter on purpose so they know it's real. Near the end of that year, the Lemon Sun Society held a winter pageant in the school gym. Maya made paper stars and taped them to a curtain that refused to hang straight. The kids read poems about buses and pigeons and a grandmother who smells like cinnamon and hope. A small boy stepped to the mic and said, "Love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's a promise that keeps adding interest until the bill comes due." The line rolled through the bleachers and landed in my lap. I looked at Maya. She shrugged, smiling. "They listen," she mouthed, "even when they're pretending not to." After the pageant, a parent I vaguely knew touched my arm. "I saw the video," she said, and for once I didn't stiffen at those words. The apology one, it helped me call my mother. She blinked, almost embarrassed. "I'm making beans tomorrow. Do you put the salt in early or late?" "Late," I said, "so it saves more than it ruins." We hugged like neighbors who have finally admitted what they're neighbors for. On the walk home, the peonies had wilted in the kitchen jar. I pressed the browning petals in a book I love and left the jar on the table empty, on purpose, because emptiness can be an invitation and not a threat. I put the binder by the sugar, ran my fingers over my name, then turned out the kitchen light. The apartment, faithful as a vow, held. I don't know if we earned a perfect ending. We earned a true one. Our hands got cleaner at a cost, and because of that they held better. We didn't simply survive the season, we learned to pick up the bill for promises and pay in the currency that doesn't devalue under pressure. Respect, apology, boundary, grace. If I could send a letter back to the woman at the bus stop in the rain, I'd tuck a single sentence in her palm: "You are allowed to say no and still love them." Maybe she already knew. Maybe she needed the years. Either way, I'm here, and here is enough.